Most men have been making at least one of 7 specific mistakes every time they go down on a partner. Mistakes that consistently reduce arousal and comfort according to the research, and that almost nobody has ever pointed out to them directly. Not because they do not care, not because they are not trying, because the information they were working from, pornography, locker room exaggeration, instinct, guesswork, was never designed to be physiologically accurate. It was designed to look a certain way on screen or sound impressive in conversation. Today, I am covering all 7 mistakes, not vague generalities, specific identifiable habits, backed by research on clitoral anatomy and female arousal, along with the exact correction the evidence supports for each one. If you recognize even one of these in your own approach, this video is going to change your next experience together. Here is exactly what we are covering today. First, the anatomical foundation. Why most men are working from an outdated map, and what the actual research on clitoral anatomy reveals about why so many common habits work against arousal rather than building it. Second, the 7 mistakes themselves, each one identified specifically with the research behind why it happens and the exact correction the evidence supports. By the end of each one, you will know precisely what to do differently. Third, the enthusiasm and presence variable, because technique alone is not the full picture. Genuine engagement is the context that makes every correction land as pleasurable rather than merely mechanical. Stay with me through all of it. This is the conversation that should have replaced whatever taught you the first time. I'm Dr. Janice Powell. I'm a certified men's sex therapist with over a decade of clinical experience. And this channel exists to give men over 50 the honest, research-backed, clinically grounded conversations about sexual health and intimacy that they deserve and almost never get anywhere else. If this is your first time here, welcome. Please subscribe right now. Every week I cover the topics your doctor does not have time for, your friends will not bring up, and the internet consistently gets wrong. You deserve better than guesswork. This channel is where the evidence lives. Let's get into it. Part 1, the anatomical foundation. Why most men are working from the wrong map. Before we get to the 7 mistakes, I want to make sure you understand the anatomical foundation underneath all of them. Because once you understand the anatomy correctly, most of these mistakes become obviously avoidable rather than mysterious. In 2005, urologist Helen O'Connell used MRI imaging to comprehensively map the clitoral structure for the first time. And what she found should have changed how every man approaches this topic. The clitoris is not the small external structure most men learned about. It is an internal structure, approximately 9 to 11 centimeters in length, comprising the external glands, 2 internal cura extending back toward the pelvis, and 2 vestibular bulbs that surround the vaginal canal on both sides. The external glands, the small visible structure most men focus on exclusively, is merely the tip of a much larger anatomical complex. Most men were implicitly taught, whether through pornography or simple lack of education, to treat that single small point as the entire target. The anatomical reality supports something completely different, a broader, more varied approach that engages the surrounding structures, rather than concentrating all attention and pressure on one small external area. Now, let's talk about why that narrow focus causes problems. Specifically, research on clitoral gland sensitivity confirms that the glands contains one of the highest concentrations of nerve endings anywhere in the human body, comparable in density to the fingertip, but packed into a far smaller surface area. This extreme sensitivity is precisely why direct, sustained, high-pressure stimulation of the glands is reported by a significant proportion of women as uncomfortable or even mildly painful, particularly early in arousal, before sufficient blood flow and engorgement have occurred to provide a buffer for that intense sensitivity. Research published in the Journal of Sex Research found that indirect stimulation applied to the clitoral hood, the sides of the glands, or the broader vulvar area rather than the exposed tip, directly was rated by surveyed women as significantly more pleasurable in the early stages of arousal. Direct gland stimulation became more tolerable and often more desired only after arousal had built sufficiently through preceding indirect contact. This single anatomical and physiological fact, the disproportionate sensitivity of the glands relative to its small size, and the way that sensitivity shifts from uncomfortable to pleasurable, specifically as arousal builds, explains a remarkable number of the mistakes we are about to cover. Almost every one of them traces back to treating a hypersensitive, internally extensive structure as if it were a small external button that simply needs more direct pressure. For men over 50 specifically, there is an additional layer of importance here. For partners who are permenopausal or postmenopausal, hormonal changes frequently increase tissue sensitivity and reduce natural lubrication, meaning that the lighter, more graduated, more anatomically informed approach we are about to cover is not just preferable. It is often physiologically necessary for comfort. Part 2, mistakes 1, 2, and 3. Mistake number 1 is going straight for the clitoris. Research on arousal sequencing confirms that beginning oral stimulation with immediate direct clitoral contact without any preceding arousal building significantly reduces both comfort and overall arousal trajectory compared to a graduated approach. Remember what we just covered. The clitoral glands before adequate arousal is often hypersensitive in an uncomfortable rather than pleasurable way. Going straight there is going straight to the most sensitive, least buffered point on the entire structure before the body has had any chance to prepare for that level of stimulation. The correction the research supports begin with broader, slower attention. The inner thighs, the labia, the perineal area. Allow several minutes of this broader contact before any direct clitoral contact occurs at all. This is not a delay tactic, and it is not foreplay in the dismissive sense of the word. It is the physiologically supported sequence for maximizing eventual pleasure and arousal at the exact point when clitoral stimulation does begin. Mistake number 2 is inconsistent rhythm and technique switching. This is one of the most consistently identified mistakes across the entire research literature on female orgasm. And I want you to pay particular attention to this one because it is also one of the most common. Research on orgasmic response confirms that changing technique, pressure, or rhythm at the exact moment when a pattern is beginning to produce a strong response is one of the most damaging errors a partner can make because it interrupts the building neurological pattern that orgasm fundamentally depends on. Here is where the problem comes from. Many men, particularly those drawing on pornography for technique reference, instinctively vary their approach constantly, assuming that variety signals skill, creativity, or attentiveness. The research says precisely the opposite. Once a specific rhythm, pressure, and location is producing a clear positive response, increased vocalization, muscle tension, breathing changes, the correction is to maintain that exact pattern without alteration. Do not introduce variety at the moment, something is working. Stay with it until orgasm occurs or she specifically indicates a change is wanted. Mistake number 3 is excessive pressure. Given everything we covered about glans nerve density, excessive pressure is one of the most commonly reported sources of discomfort during oral sex. Research on pressure sensitivity confirms that lighter, more varied pressure, particularly in early arousal, is rated as significantly more pleasurable than firm sustained pressure, with tolerance for firmer pressure increasing gradually only as arousal builds over time. The correction here is straightforward, but requires recalibrating instinct. Begin with significantly lighter pressure than instinct or pornography-derived expectation suggests. Increase pressure gradually only in response to clear positive feedback, not as a default escalation strategy applied regardless of how the stimulation is being received. Part 3. Mistakes 4, 5, and 6. Mistake number 4 is treating the vulva as a single point. We have already established that the clitoris itself is a far larger structure than the visible glands. But the mistake extends beyond clitoral anatomy specifically. Research on the full erogenous mapping of the vulva confirms that the labia minora, the vestibule, the paranal area, and the broader ulvar region all contain significant nerve density and contribute meaningfully to overall arousal. Yet, many men treat oral sex as stimulation of a single point, narrowing their entire approach to one small area for the full duration of the encounter. The correction supported by the evidence. Incorporate attention to the labia. Gently explore the vestibular area. Vary your attention across the broader vulvar region rather than narrowing focus exclusively to the clitoral glands throughout the entire encounter. The anatomy is rich and extensive, treated that way. Mistake number 5 is insufficient duration. Research on arousal timing confirms that women typically require considerably more time to reach the physiological and psychological threshold associated with orgasm than is commonly assumed. And men frequently and significantly underestimate this required duration, particularly when the reference point is pornography, which compresses arousal timelines dramatically for visual storytelling purposes rather than physiological accuracy. The correction here is primarily a recalibration of expectation. Clear throat. Research-supported timelines should anticipate a meaningfully longer duration than most men instinctively allocate. Patience itself functions as a technique here because rushing communicates urgency, and that communicated urgency can itself interfere with the psychological relaxation that arousal genuinely requires. Slow down more than feels natural. The research says natural instinct is consistently too fast. Mistake number 6 is ignoring verbal and nonverbal feedback. Research on sexual communication and orgasmic success identifies responsiveness to real-time feedback, verbal guidance, sounds, movement, breathing changes as one of the strongest predictors of successful outcomes available. And it identifies the failure to read or respond to this feedback as one of the most consistently reported frustrations among women regarding oral sex. Specifically, the correction treats every sound, every movement, every verbal cue as active data rather than background noise. If her breathing changes, if her hips move in a particular direction, if a sound becomes more frequent or more intense, that is information telling you exactly what is working. Adjust pressure, location, and rhythm in direct response to what that feedback indicates. Do not continue a predetermined approach regardless of the signals you are receiving. The feedback is the most accurate guide available to you in that moment, more accurate than any technique you learned in advance. Part 4, Mistake 7 and the enthusiasm variable. Mistake number 7 is stopping or changing approach at the point of climax. This is a specific and commonly reported frustration in the research, and it is worth understanding precisely why it happens. Many partners pause, change technique, or reduce intensity at exactly the moment a woman is approaching or experiencing orgasm. Often, due to genuine uncertainty about what is happening or a mistaken belief that climax has already concluded when in fact it is ongoing or building toward a peak. Female orgasm frequently involves what researchers describe as a build-release continued sensitivity pattern, meaning the experience does not always conclude cleanly at a single obvious moment the way male orgasm typically does. A brief pause in vocalization or movement does not necessarily mean the experience has ended. The correction supported by the evidence. Maintain the exact stimulation pattern through the entirety of the orgasmic response, including through any apparent pause, rather than stopping at the first sign of what might be the conclusion. The most reliable signal that stimulation should change or stop is a clear verbal or physical cue from her directly, not your own assumption about what a pause means. When in doubt, continue what was working until she tells you otherwise. Now let's talk about the enthusiasm variable, because everything we have covered so far is technical, and technique alone is not the complete picture. As established in earlier research on this channel, genuine enthusiasm communicated through your own engagement. Sound and evident enjoyment of what you are doing is rated by women as more important to the overall experience than technical precision alone. The 7 corrections we have covered matter significantly, but they operate within a context, and that context is authentic enthusiasm, clear throat. The difference between a man performing a checklist of corrected behaviors and a man who is genuinely, visibly enjoying the experience of giving his partner pleasure. The corrections above are not a script to follow mechanically. They are the framework within which genuine enthusiasm and attentiveness can actually land as pleasurable rather than merely competent. Bring both. The technique creates the conditions. The enthusiasm is what makes the conditions feel genuinely good. The maturity advantage. I want to say something directly to the men over 50 watching this. Every single correction we have covered today rewards patience, presence, and genuine attentiveness over speed, urgency, and performance pressure. Those are precisely the qualities that men over 50 are, in many respects, more naturally positioned to provide than younger men. The arousal sequencing, correction, building slowly through broader contact before direct clitoral stimulation requires patience that the urgency of younger sexuality often does not allow access to. The duration correction clears throat, anticipating significantly longer timelines than instinct suggests, requires a freedom from the rush toward conclusion that frequently characterizes younger male sexuality. The feedback responsiveness correction, treating sound and movement as active data rather than background noise, requires a quality of genuine, unhurried attention that develops with maturity and self-awareness rather than youth. None of the 7 corrections we covered today require natural talent, special skill, or anything that declines with age. They are specific, learnable adjustments that any man genuinely willing to apply them can put into practice immediately, starting with his very next encounter. And the genuine motivation to prioritize a partner's experience, which research consistently identifies as one of the strongest predictors of actually implementing corrections like these. Consistently tends to deepen rather than diminish with age and experience. You do not need anything you do not already have. You need the specific information which you now have and the willingness to apply it. That willingness is something men over 50 bring to this conversation more reliably than almost any other group. Let me give you the complete picture one final time. The clitoris is a far larger, more internally extensive structure than most men were ever taught. And the gland specifically carries an extreme concentration of nerve endings that makes early direct high-pressure stimulation more likely to be uncomfortable than pleasurable. The 7 mistakes to stop making are going straight for the clitoris without building arousal first, changing rhythm or technique at the exact moment something is working, applying excessive pressure rather than starting light, treating the vulva as a single point rather than a broad and varied anatomical region, underestimating how much time genuine arousal actually requires, ignoring the real-time verbal and nonverbal feedback that tells you exactly what is working and stopping or changing approach at the precise moment of climax due to uncertainty about what is happening. The corrections for each are specific and immediately applicable. Build broadly before going direct. Maintain a working pattern rather than varying for variety's sake. Start lighter than instinct suggests. Explore the full vulva region rather than one point. Allow significantly more time than feels natural. Treat sound and movement as active guidance and maintain stimulation through apparent pauses until you receive a clear signal to change. And underneath all 7 corrections, bring genuine enthusiasm. Because technique creates the conditions for pleasure, but authentic engagement is what makes those conditions actually feel good. If this video gave you something specific and useful today, please like it. It helps other men who need this conversation find it. Leave your questions in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you are not yet subscribed, do it now. This channel exists to give men over 50 the honest, evidence-based, clinically grounded conversations about sexual health and intimacy that they deserve and rarely get anywhere else. I'm Dr. Janice Powell. I'll see you in the next one.